had no running water and no electricity, and I was living there to understand how my parents and my grandparents' generation grew up and lived. And we were raising our children there, and we were living with a family that wove rugs and herded sheep for a living, and one day we were out herding sheep. The man I was herding sheep with was a boarding school survivor, and we're walking through the fields. He spoke better Navajo than English. And George Bush was in office, and he was just reintroducing this dialogue on immigration reform. And I said to my friend, I said, the whole nation is talking about immigration reform. I'm curious, what are your thoughts? And he said, well, there's already so many of them here, maybe we shouldn't have borders anymore. Now, if you're anywhere else in the country, you're assuming he's talking about the 14 million undocumented who've come over the southern border. But because we're on a reservation, because we're both Native, because he's a boarding school survivor, you have to pause and ask, was he talking about the 14 million or the 300 million? Was he talking about the 14 million who've come over the southern border or the 300 million who have been pouring into this nation from Europe for centuries? And I liked the ambiguity so much I didn't even ask him to clarify. And after that, I began teaching and telling people that without Native peoples at the table, all you have is one generation of undocumented immigrants trying to figure out to do with another generation of undocumented immigrants, and there's no integrity in the dialogue. I don't care if you're building a wall to keep people out or you're tearing one down to let people in. If you don't have Native peoples at the center of this dialogue, your conversation has no integrity and no authority. If you want to reform and have comprehensive and just immigration reform, and you do not invite the people who are the host people of the land that you stole, and they are right in front of you, and you do not bring them into the dialogue, whatever law you write, whatever precedent you create will have no authority or integrity. And this is where I'm saying, as Native peoples, there is something that we can do that this country desperately needs, which is we need to step into our role as the host people of the land. We are not the helpless victims of an oppressive colonial government. We are the host people of Turtle Island. For hundreds of years, immigrants have moved to this land. They've left their homes in Europe and other places around the world. They've left places they've known and understood. They've left family and friends. They've left their own religions and their own creation stories. And they've come here seeking a land, seeking a myth of prosperity. They've never asked for, nor have they ever been given permission to be here. As a result, they don't know why this mountain sits over there. They don't know why that river flows over here. And they live here like someone lives in a hotel room. As Native peoples, we are the host people of the land. Our creation stories take place here. They tell us why that mountain sets over there and why this river flows over here. And these stories demand, encourage, exhort us to live here sustainably. And so I am calling us as Native peoples to not allow ourselves to be labeled with this victim mentality, and instead to begin stepping into our role as the hosts of the land. I loved what happened at Standing Rock. Tens of thousands of Native peoples from hundreds of tribes coming together, committed to the teachings of our elders, to ceremony and to prayer, and in a unified voice telling this nation that you can't drink oil and that water is life. I love the way that our people stepped into our role as the host people of the land. And this is what I envision for our nation moving forward. The United States of America, this nation of undocumented immigrants going back all the way to 1492. There is something that they fear more than anything else. Something that they are afraid of more than anything else. It's not about being invaded. It's not about being removed. But years ago, when they stole the Black Hills from the Lakota people. And they carved into that mountain the face of one of their most genocidal presidents, who was Abraham Lincoln. 3 years after signing the Pacific Railway Act, Abraham Lincoln had ethnically cleansed the Dakota and Winnebago from Minnesota, the Cheyenne and Arapaho from Colorado, and the Mescalero, Apache, and the Navajo from New Mexico. He was seriously one of the most genocidal presidents in our nation's history, and they carved his face into this mountain. And years later, they felt bad about what they did, and they offered to the Lakota people that they could pay them for this land. And the Lakota people said, this land's not for sale. You can't pay us for this land. There is literally billions of dollars sitting in a trust fund the Lakota people refuse to touch, because they are telling the U.S. government, you cannot buy this land. And that is what is terrifying. That is what is terrifying for this nation, that we would not be willing to sell this land and to sell the blood that they put on it. And instead we would say, no, this land is more sacred than the money you can offer. And you cannot buy your own innocence, and you cannot purchase to make right what was done wrong. And I love the example our Lakota people are putting forward. And because what this does is it changes the role of how we view ourselves within this land. I want to end with one last story. Several years ago, during President Obama's last administration, last days in office, he went up to Alaska and he renamed the mountain up there back to Mount Denali. And this organization in the U.S. asked me to write about why this was so significant for Native peoples, that they renamed this mountain back to the indigenous name of Mount Denali. And the article I gave them was not about why this was so great for Native peoples, but why this was so great for white people. I said, ever since that mountain was named after the president it was named after, or after the white man it was named after, the Athabascan people of Alaska, whose mountain this is and whose part of their creation story it plays, they have been working for literally hundreds of years to rename this mountain back to Denali. I said, what an amazing gift that is, that they wanted this nation to use their sacred mountain's name. I said, how wonderful is that they wanted to teach this nation about this land and about that mountain by allowing them to use the sacred name of Denali publicly. I said, this is an amazing gift that the Athabascan people have been trying to give to the United States, which is the privilege of using the name of their mountain. See, the United States of America, I would say, is a nation that desperately needs to be adopted. It's a nation that is seeking for space in these lands. And it's learning it can't buy it, it can't steal it, it can't rob it. You, me, and our ancestors, we have something that the United States of America does not have. And that's legitimacy, story, relations here in this land that tie us to Turtle Island. And that can't be stolen from us, that can't be purchased from us, and that can't be taken from us. And so, as we step into our role as the host people of the land, we are the only ones left, I would say, in the world who can look at this nation in the eye and actually speak to them with authority. And we can train them and instruct them and help them to understand what it means to live well within these lands. And this is my vision for Indigenous Peoples Day. That we as Native peoples will step into our role as the host people of the land. We will no longer allow ourselves to be labeled as victims. Not that injustice hasn't been done against us, but we will not allow that injustice to define us. And instead we will rise up remembering the teachings of our ancestors, the teachings of our elders, the prayers and the ceremonies and the things that we've been taught through this land, and we will reclaim our role as the host people of the land. I am so glad to see everyone here gathered today. It warms my heart to know that you've been celebrating, and we will be celebrating throughout the day and tomorrow, not Columbus Day, but Indigenous Peoples Day. Shahat, my brothers and sisters. Thank you very, very much for allowing me a few moments to speak here.
All right, Mark Charles, give him a round of applause. Thank you so much for taking time out of his schedule